This is the plane which the world believes is state-of-the-art technology. But it's not. Somewhere in secret, its replacement may already be flying, leaving unexplained traces in the night sky.
You get a light up there in the sky, and light could be caused by a lot of different things, and you have 10 different observers all looking at that light. Each of those 10 observers is going to see something else. Someone will see God, someone will see Jesus, someone will see a UFO, others will see conspiracies.
Amid this uncertainty, people are left to speculate and wonder.
We're being visited by extraterrestrial beings. We're possibly confronting beings from maybe another dimension, perhaps our own future. We really don't know, and that's the beauty of it.
We're dealing with technologies that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. Not what you can think or what we're doing today, but what you can just visualize in your mind. 50 years beyond that, and they're working on it.
This is the story of a journey along the frontier between what is real and what is imagined. At its heart is the secret defense establishment of the richest nation on Earth.
I'm Nick Cook. I'm the aviation editor of Jane's Defence Weekly, a trade publication that reports on the inner workings of the defence business. Over recent years, it's been impossible for me to ignore this kind of barrage of publicity we've been hearing about unidentified flying objects or UFOs. So I've decided to embark on a journey to see if I can get to the core of what may or may not be going on. Now, the only real clue I have, given that most of the reports of UFOs, or at least a lot of them, come from America, is this document here, which is the annually published list of defense spending put out by the Pentagon. Inside this document is every single conceivable item of military equipment that America is likely to buy for its armed forces. But if you add up all the line items inside this budget book, and you subtract their total from the annual published total of $250 billion that the Pentagon reports to Congress, you find that there's a mismatch of about $30 billion. Now, this is what we call the black budget, or America's billion-dollar secret, which is reserved for deeply classified programs. Now, I'm wondering whether inside this classified pot of money there may be some relationship between, say, deeply classified aircraft, which is something I know about, and what people commonly report as unidentified flying objects. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to be crisscrossing America, talking to people, visiting facilities, to see whether I can find the truth. There are two worlds of defense, a white world you can see and a black world you can't.
Gentlemen, before you get too far away, how about a big round of applause for Thunderbird number 8, one of the best narrators.
Aerospace exhibitions are part of the white world, but behind them lies a realm of secrecy and super technology, way beyond anything they put on show.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Nick.
How you doing?
Fine. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Where is it again?
Hi. Hello.
The white world is an interesting enough place, but it's the hidden part, the black world, that interests me.
If you could just explain.
At its center, away from all this glitz and show, is a mysterious airbase called Area 51, a place that has become a mecca for UFO watchers and serious defense analysts alike. Area 51 would be my ultimate destination, but getting there would turn out to be a journey as much through the mind as on the road.
Well, I've reached Fort Worth. The reason I'm here is because a while back I was interviewing a guy called Bob Widmer. Now it transpires that 40 odd years ago, Bob Widmer, as the head of design at what was then General Dynamics Convair, was working on a program, very, very secret program called FISH, sometimes known as Kingfish. And this was a requirement that the CIA needed for a very fast-flying spy plane. And he competed against a different company at the time. Now, the staggering point to me in this story is that Bob Widmer's design lost the competition for this CIA spy plane. But today, that is some 45 years on from when he was designing it, it's still classified.
We had a program called the Super Hustler. The CIA came here and visited me one day. And they said, wasn't there something I could do with this technology? So we tried to come up with an airplane that was as near as possible to a saucer.
And did you?
And we did.
Where is it?
We shaped it. Well, we shaped this, that's this fish.
That's the fish. So the
Sure.
fish looked like a saucer.
Well, not completely. I told you we used the saucer as a start. So the front, you see,
Looks.
and then we took the back and we notched. We had to take it and a piece of it, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. It was as close as we could get. It was always the ideal that we used. We can't do any better than we can with a treated saucer. That was sort of the goal that we used.
This is the plane that won the competition, the Lockheed-built Blackbird. For years, its performance, even at times its existence, was kept totally secret. But bit by bit, the data began to leak out, that it was the fastest, highest flying plane ever built, used for top secret reconnaissance missions all over the world. It's a classic example of a black program gradually turning white. To find out more about FISH, Bob Widmer's design, I went first to the CIA, but even 40 years on it was still classified. So I asked Bob instead.
I don't have a copy. I don't have it.
Are you not allowed to have a copy of it?
I don't know, when these rules were made, you get me, when the rules were made, to close the door, shut the door, and that's it.
Secret.
Well, it was a class higher than secret. The doors were shut. That meant that whatever I had in my files, or what everyone else had, all was gathered together and was done. And a lot of it was then burned and destroyed.
And this is for a project that never actually flew.
That's true.
45 odd years ago.
That's true.
How do you explain that?
It's an intriguing story. What I find particularly fascinating is that some aspects of Widmer's design don't seem too far away from a black world project that many people are talking about right now. Ask officially and everyone will deny it, but the strong rumor is that America already has a plane in the skies to replace Blackbird. It's called Aurora and goes faster and higher than its predecessor. So I'm here to talk to a congressman who's been asking awkward questions about it on Capitol Hill.
Do you know whether Aurora exists?
I have it has not been verified to me through legitimate channels that the Aurora exists. And thus, if it does exist, I have not been able to find out the information about the project that I would need to know as chairman of the Space Subcommittee that would enable me to see that technologies that were developed for the Aurora could be part of our calculations as to how much should go into the budget, into our space budget.
You wrote to President Clinton requesting declassification of the black budget.
And the only word back that I received from the president was a letter acknowledging my letter, and we haven't received a letter answering my specific request about releasing information about black programs, especially about Aurora, if it exists.
Are you yourself a believer in Aurora?
Well, if I had to bet the mortgage, I would probably come down on the side of saying there is an Aurora and that there's something out there that was developed in the latter years of the Cold War that uses some kind of a scramjet or ramjet that goes to 6 to 8 times the speed of sound and probably unmanned, made with the latest materials and technology and engines and craft. I would think there is, because there's been too many sightings and too many people who are reliable sources that what they've seen is inexplicable except for that.
I too share Congressman Rohrabacher's hunch that something has been developed. Blackbird had been flying for at least 3 years before anyone admitted its existence. In Aurora's case, it would certainly explain where some of the Pentagon's missing billions have gone. All over America, there are people who are picking away at the secrets of the black world. I'd heard about one of them, a guy called Steve Douglas in Amarillo, Texas, who even claimed to have seen something that could have been Aurora.
Well, it happened on a spring day here a few years ago. I was in my office monitoring military traffic, just like I always do, when I heard some unusual traffic, and then a huge roar and rumble, like the sky splitting apart, shaking the house. You could actually feel this rumble in your chest. So I went outside to see what was making the commotion, and here came this aircraft at breakneck speed flying from southwest to northeast right over the town. Well, I grabbed my camera, and by the time I got back out there, of course the aircraft was gone because it was flying so fast. But it left this unique contrail, this spotted string of pearls like donuts on a rope right across the sky. So I shot some pictures of the contrail.
In itself, the contrail doesn't add up to evidence of Aurora's existence. As with everything you discover on the fringes of the black world and the white, it's a question of putting small pieces into a larger jigsaw. Douglas is determined to find rational explanations for what other people simply call UFOs, but my instinct tells me there's much more to it than this.
I think the security managers have been actively encouraging flying saucer reports about sightings around their facility. Because if everybody thinks you have people just out there seeing flying saucers, it makes it a lot easier to hide highly classified aircraft.
I'd spoken to John Pike before I left Washington. He's been making the connection between UFO sightings and top-secret aircraft for years.
A lot of the reconnaissance balloons that the Central Intelligence Agency was flying back in the 1950s and high-flying aircraft in the early 1960s, according to a CIA study, accounted for a lot of flying saucer reports back then. When you look up in the sky, the question of whether you see a high-flying aircraft or whether you see a flying saucer may just depend on what you saw on television the previous night.
Much of me agreed, but I needed the other side of the story, a story I'd never investigated before because it had always seemed two-way out. Someone had pointed me towards Jim Mars, an authority on UFOs and conspiracies.
In the military mind, the UFOs would represent advanced technology. And of course, to them, advanced technology then represents potential weaponry. And therefore, they've got to keep it all secret. You got to keep it secret from your enemies, and then you got to keep it secret from your own people so that your enemies don't get it, etc., etc.
Is the UFO phenomenon about alien beings, or is there an earthly dimension to it as well?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? I'm often asked, do UFOs represent spaceship from another planet, or do they come from another dimension? Or do they come from another time? Or are they simply advanced technology being tested by our governments? And I would tell you that the answer is yes. All of the above.
It's dead easy to dismiss a lot of these people as cranky or deluded, but the one thing I've learned after years in the business is never to dismiss something as impossible simply because you can't imagine it happening. Time was when traveling in space was laughed off as fiction, but it happened sure enough, and much of it was developed here at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. NASA is still the place where dreams come true. Some people call it the white face of the black world. There's probably more money pumping through this one NASA facility than there is through the entire British aerospace scientific establishment. And this is what I find incredible about America, is that you can get so much technology concentrated in one place, but you also realize that the stuff is everywhere. It's across the entire country.
Monitors are reporting that the spacecraft is go for launch.
Hydraulics go. SSC, hydraulics internal.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting.
Rocket launches 12, at Cape Kennedy 11, are what the public see, 10, 9, but I wanted to get inside the heads of the dream makers.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and we have liftoff of NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter as we continue to explore the mysteries of the red planet. View from the second stage of the Boeing Delta II vehicle as we continue to rise 20 seconds after liftoff. Everything continues to go well. Everything continues.
There's an awful lot goes on here. A lot of it is current science, stuff that's happening here and now, essentially rocket technology, things that really haven't changed too much since World War II. But there's also an awful lot which is way, way out Tomorrowland. And one or two people I hope to be speaking to here should have a very insightful view into the future, and we're probably talking decades, if not hundreds of years out in terms of space travel.
A wonderful view of the Earth's limb as we rise above the Earth's surface with our Mars Climate Orbiter.
What I really wanted to know was, were there revolutionary forms of propulsion available that would explain the otherwise impossible?
nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is 4 light years away. We're looking at, already today, breakthrough physics, physical phenomena that has not been proven yet, that will be required to make a fast trip to the Alpha Centauri system. Antimatter-driven fusion drives, space warp, the ways to get to other stars in a Star Trek type fashion. If we're not thinking about that kind of stuff today, we won't be going to the stars in 100 years. I guarantee it. Just like I can guarantee, because we didn't start looking at the technology to go to Mars back during the Apollo era, we're not there today. And if we had been thinking about that at the close of that era, we would be there and have it colonized today.
So we need to be thinking about it now.
Absolutely.
It may seem a long way from secret aircraft, but the inspiration for what NASA is doing is driven by the same impulse: to turn dreams into reality. One person I met even talked seriously about beating the speed of light by bending space, in effect to bring the stars closer to us. It's called traveling through a wormhole.
We're used to dealing with space in 3 dimensions. You get from point A to point B, you follow a straight line. A wormhole is based on the idea that you can actually curve space. That gravity, Einstein discovered that gravity actually curves large masses curve space. Well, the same thing goes with a wormhole. Basically, you're curving and distorting space, so you don't have to follow the normal dimensions. Sort of go up and out into a 4th dimension, if you will. And that allows you to go beyond and go much faster, effectively, than the speed of light. The speed of light, is something that pertains to the 3 dimensions, the space that we deal with day to day. But it allows you to get out of that space and go above that, up and out, so to speak.
So it does offer the possibility of crossing the universe.
Yeah, if you can build a wormhole, certainly. Yeah, you probably, who knows? But you got to be careful to make sure that you have the right endpoint. Who knows where you'll end up if you just generate it. You could end up anywhere in the universe. So that's something to be very careful about.
Hearing someone talk this way, I knew the detour to NASA hadn't been a waste. Though they say this stuff is way in the future, just how far away is anyone's guess. Maybe in the black world, some of it was a lot closer to reality than anyone at NASA believed or cared to admit.
I've always been extremely excited by this landscape. It's a sort of landscape that allows you to believe that anything is possible. I look up into that big old sky and that enormous horizon. Because there is absolutely nothing like it where I come from, it does fill you with this sort of strange belief that anything is possible out here. And it's sort of reflected in the people that I speak to, because when you're out in somewhere like New Mexico, in this landscape, there's a look in their eyes that kind of says, yes, anything is possible out here in a technology sense. And maybe the two feed off each other, I don't know. Maybe the landscape inspires the engineers who do these things to go out there and do extraordinary things, but I definitely get the impression that anything is possible in this place.
I think that New Mexico is an important state for UFO sightings for a variety of reasons, but one primarily, at least in the paranormal level, has to do with that act of magic we committed in 1945 by detonating an atomic bomb. It just seems as if that atomic blast acted as a magnet for all sorts of strange phenomena.
New Mexico is full of people like Charlie Bates. He and his wife are the foot soldiers of the UFO movement.
To be a UFO investigator for me means to be on the forefront of what is possibly the most important discovery of the end of this millennium. And that is one of several possibilities that we're being visited by extraterrestrial beings, that we're possibly being confronting beings from maybe another dimension, perhaps our own future. We really don't know, and that's the beauty of it. And that's what makes this such an appealing job.
For me, part of it is confronting my own, sometimes it's too much of a willingness to believe everything I hear. So I'm trying, this is a good experience for me to learn to be more skeptical, really, and more selective in what I'm ready to believe. But another beauty of it for me is not only finding out more of what's out there, it seems that the more we find out, the more that's found out, the more questions there are. So that's the beauty of it and the frustration of it.
While the Bates erred towards the paranormal, I was still firmly in the skeptics camp. Perhaps the person who took me closest to believing in things I'd normally have thought were impossible was Boyd Bushman. He is a senior scientist for Lockheed Martin, the world's biggest defense contractor. In the quest for breakthroughs in aircraft propulsion, it was Bushman's job to think beyond the frontiers of what is known and understood. Doing what he did, I strongly suspected that he lived on the fringes of the black world. Perhaps nervous of what he could and couldn't say, he certainly seemed to talk in riddles.
I believe that nature does not speak English. What nature tells us is what must be honored. It has been talking to us in many domains, and we have data sets that we're still trying to understand. But I can't talk to all the theoreticians, because there don't exist theories where I am. What we have is wonderful, and it comes from miracles occurring. But that we will see will not be what we have. And I therefore tell my team, if you know anything, I really don't want to talk to you, because everything we know has already gone to production. Now, if there's something you kind of wonder, if you think of, or etc., let's take those steps to the future. And that's what we always have to do, is walk literally. Kind of a lonely walk, but a very, very rewarding walk, to listen where languages are not taught and verbalization is not used. But we have to learn its language.
I felt he was trying to tell me something he wasn't allowed to talk about. So I asked him about the holy grail of science fiction, anti-gravity propulsion.
I do notice in recent publications that one of the latest group of my colleagues have said that they have evidence, because of the separation of the galaxies, that there is an anti-gravity. I went back to some of the first work on gravity done by Galileo, and he climbed his Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped 2 stones. They arrived at the ground at the same time. I climbed my Leaning Tower of Building 500 here at the company, and I dropped my 2 weights that were exactly the same weight, and they did not arrive at the ground at the same time. I had purposely placed opposing magnets that didn't like each other, like two norths together. And I had already done an iron filing test that showed that it was showering out an entire magnetic plane. And I wanted to see how that magnetic plane interfaced with gravity.
He showed me a film of extraordinary experiments that had been done in Canada 10 years ago. A scientist there appeared to have found a way of getting objects to defy gravity by beaming different energy waves at them. Most people had written it off as a conjuring trick, but Bushman took it seriously and was trying to develop his own techniques.
I'm refining and heading towards something that all you have to do is charge, and it is lifting up. It is losing weight. When we complete the technology, it should fly.
I was astounded that someone of Bushman's standing should seriously discuss the notion of anti-gravity with me. His experimental work opened up a world of possibilities that for me has made the unbelievable believable.
Small fireballs, large fireballs, discs, triangles, 300-foot flying rectangles, formations of glowing orbs, stuff that blinks out and blinks back in. It seems to render itself invisible.
Yellow spherical object, large dark object, triangular, blot out the stars for no sound whatsoever.
I'm now heading towards southern Colorado, and the reason I'm going up there is that there have been a lot of sightings reports of strange objects in the sky. Now, until this point, you know, I really was heading up there with all the skepticism that someone who has heard about flying saucers and the like and really doesn't want to believe them can muster. I mean, I was and still am reticent, but the exciting thing now is that thanks to Boyd Bushman at Lockheed Martin, you know, I can actually dare to believe that there might be some very down-to-earth explanation for what one commonly perceives as UFOs. It's hard even to say the word sometimes, UFO, because it sounds very strange. But anyway, that's why we're heading to southern Colorado to experience some of the weirdness that people say is going on up there.
The first guy with a strange story I met in Colorado was Ken Fry.
And there was a light off in the western horizon that looked like the object was maybe several hundred feet high. At first I thought it might have been a planet such as Venus, and then I thought, well, it's kind of a light orange or yellow color. So I stopped and looked at it for a few minutes. I pulled over, and it started moving, kind of hovering. And then I drove down the highway a little further, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And then about 5 seconds later, I saw something maybe 200 feet above Del Norte. It was an object, a dark object. I could see some small lights on the underside of it, and but there was no noise because I turned over and turned off my engine, and there was absolutely no noise and just very few lights. It appeared to be a fairly large object. I couldn't tell if it was triangular shaped or square or round. But
how could you tell it was large?
Just seems like by the stars. I looked up and couldn't see any stars.
So it obscured the stars. You got a kind of an image of a silhouette.
Right.
was just the start of it. Everyone I spoke to had a story to tell. David Perkins had been researching the sightings for 25 years.
Where we live, it's just a continuous barrage. This is southern Colorado we're talking about, of strange craft being reported by people that are reputable observers, many of them ex-military observers. A friend of mine, a colleague, works for the Defense Department. He has a contract to do advanced research for them, so he's a very reputable fellow. One day he was out jogging and went over a little hill and looked down below him at a large pasture that was down there, and he saw a craft that was hovering just above the ground, he said. And he told me that it was a mile long, hovering there, and you could see clearly the outlines of windows. It was a large metallic craft, totally silent. He stared at it a while, became frightened, and ran back into town, immediately called NORAD, and said, could you please tell me what is a mile long that's hovering in the pasture outside of town? And they, of course, said, we have no idea what you're talking about.
NORAD being North American Air Defense Command.
Right. And I thought that was a very interesting and reputable report, because obviously he had a lot to lose by giving crackpot reports if he's working for the Defense Department. And that isn't the only report of craft that size. I've had several other incidents where people have described mile-long craft, or half-mile-long craft, or quarter-mile-long craft flying incredibly low, with all kinds of flashing lights and lights going around the rims in sequencing fashion. So we've seen some amazingly large, we've had reports of amazingly large craft all over the area.
I might have discounted stories like these, except I was hearing them all over the place. But the thing everyone was really talking about were mysterious cattle mutilations. At first sight they seemed irrelevant, but the frequency of the stories and the fact they always seemed to be associated with UFO sightings meant that I couldn't ignore them. So I went to see Chris O'Brien, a resident expert on the subject.
I investigated a case, just your average rancher, average ranching family in the middle of nowhere. They literally had no trees, no places to hide, nothing for a mile all the way around them. One road in, one road out. Rancher gets up in the morning, over his cup of coffee, looks out, and 30 feet from his house is a mutilated cow. Now, if I was that rancher, I would immediately go into a place of fear. I would think, hey, whoever it was could have come in here and done this to me or my family. And one of the things I think is really important and possibly crucial, and maybe our biggest clue, is that the animals are left where they're found. If somebody is cutting up and taking body parts, they could just take the whole animal away and no one would ever know. It would be just a missing, head of livestock. But they leave them there, and that to me tells me and other investigators that a signal is being sent. I don't think I know quite yet what that signal is, but I can tell you that it has to do with fear, with control, and with the elements that tend to keep people in their place.
Who is supposed to be keeping us in our place is not clear. Chris doesn't pretend to have any answers, but he showed me some video to back up his point.
Predators have obviously torn this animal up, but there's unusual cookie cutter incisions. Go ahead, tell me that coyotes did that. And this animal appears to have been cookie cutter incised all the way from the chin, all the way down the belly to the rear end. There's no question in my mind that that is not tearing and ripping action from coyote. It can't be. It looks like the thing was sewn together and then you pulled the sewing out. Now, I've never seen this before, but correct me if I'm wrong. Do predators pop the hoof material off the feet? I've never seen that before. I've never heard of that.
Chris O'Brien told me about a rancher who'd had a direct experience of a strange visitation.
Gone to bed about 10 o'clock that night, and for some reason around 10:30,
I felt that there was something wasn't right. Went out of the front porch of the house, and very surprised to find a helicopter hovering just over the very top of the house. As I come out and tried to discern why a helicopter was over our house, I became aware of the fact that it wasn't making any noise. The only reason that I knew a helicopter was over our house was the beating of the rotors and the down pressure of the air from a helicopter blade.
So it was there was downwash and it was beating against the trees, and you were conscious that this helicopter was close?
Yeah, I knew that it was barely over the house because I'd had some time at an air station during the time that I was in the Coast Guard, about 9 months, where I was on flight crews and search and rescue crews where I was around a helicopter a lot. And for the particular downwash and down pressure that I was getting and experiencing, I knew that the helicopter was just over us, just hovering over the top of the house. And I could also see the bushes and the branches and the trees with a lot of sway with the beat of the helicopter blade.
On an otherwise perfectly still night?
Very cold, very still.
And this helicopter was not making any noise?
I know that it wasn't making any noise because I was trying to discern whether it was a turbine helicopter or a mechanical helicopter to see if I could hear the turbine whine or the pistons on a mechanical helicopter, because I was very familiar with turbine helicopters, and it was just very, very strange.
Nothing?
Nothing. No sound. Possibly the sound of the wind moving violently from from the rotors, but that's all. No other sound.
The next morning, John Haar and his sons made an unsettling discovery in a field behind the house.
We found, first of all, a dead cow that had apparently died in her sleep. She was in a sleeping position, had never moved, with no apparent cause of death. And then we found a cow on her side that we just thought was dead at first. And as we looked more closely, my wife noticed that the cow had been mutilated, that the skin on the jawline of the cow had been precisely removed, that all of the meat was taken off the bones, and the sex organs had been cut out very carefully of this cow. And no other apparent cause of death, but it had been obviously mutilated. And as I studied it and looked at it, it became more obvious to me all the time that this was something that was too precise and too fine to have been done with less than a surgeon's scalpel. I'm angry. I wish if they wanted to kill cows, they'd kill their own cattle. I wish it wasn't mine. I don't know who they are, but they are powerful enough and have enough money to have helicopters that can apparently stun cattle as they sleep in the ground and run silently. Maybe it's Big Brother, I don't know. My wife's not here today during this interview because of the fear that she feels it might bring upon us, but I'm not afraid of it.
And how does that fear sort of articulate itself? What do people, your wife, think is going to happen or could happen?
Well, she believes that I may be stepping into something bigger than what we're capable of handling ourselves, which is very possible. If there's some sort of, I don't know, plot or whatever that, it's beyond my understanding. I don't know. It's bigger than what we are. I don't know why someone would do this, but if they're ruthless enough to kill cattle, what are they going to kill our children next?
Things had suddenly taken a sinister turn. Some people wanted to believe that extraterrestrials were responsible. Others that it was the work of the government. Either notion was pretty hard to get my head around. I felt I had entered a looking-glass world. In the midst of this madness, I wanted to know if David Perkins had come to any conclusions.
Just from my own background and research into this over 25 years, I find it hard to believe that anybody knows what's going on, because we're seeing something that's creating supposedly, apparently, real physical events in the environment. Cattle mutilations, landing traces, crop circles, if you will, any number of other things. We have just that tangential sort of piece of evidence that would suggest something but is not conclusive to the scientific community. From my own point of view, it doesn't satisfy my curiosity as to what is actually behind the phenomenon. I suspect it's a much bigger picture than extraterrestrials even. To me, that seems like a simplistic answer. That it doesn't really satisfy my criteria for answering all the questions that surround, for instance, a cattle mutilation. I can't throw out half of the evidence, as most people do, to satisfy their pet theory. Most of my colleagues say, okay, it's got to be extraterrestrials because people saw flying saucers. Some people saw cows being lifted in beams of light into craft. Well, that's all very fine, but what about these the Bigfoot that's running around in the field, or these strange cryptozoological creatures that people report around these incidents, and the haunted houses that the people live in who own the cows? And I mean, I find it hard to believe that aliens are, involved in our lives to the degree that they're hiding our toothbrushes at night and stuff like this. I think there's got to be some other explanation. From my point of view and my own research after all this time, I tend to feel it's a reflective phenomenon, that somehow it's emanating from humans, emanating from the Earth, somehow part of our existence here rather than something that's coming from above and beyond.
It's very difficult to know what is going on in this place. There are loads of reports of unconventional aircraft, and there are equally mysterious and somewhat chilling reports of cattle mutilations. Now, the people seem to have reached a conclusion that these two events go hand in hand. That may well be. I'd say the overriding impression I come away with here is that people want answers and that they are afraid. And you can't help but soak up that kind of an atmosphere.
My experience, though, has indicated that most of the rank and file people in government and in the American military have simply not been clued into what is really going on. I feel that the definite knowledge that the United States government holds is in the hands of a very select few people. And I think in order to keep that information out of other hands, they resort to classification, denial, and disinformation.
I hadn't been prepared for any of this. I had moved from skepticism about UFOs at the outset to the possibility that something in some shape, way or form existed. I felt the need to get back with my feet on the ground and talk to people that, wearing my technology hat, I at least knew and understood. And so I returned to Washington to tackle General George Mullner of the U.S. Air Force, the man responsible for how the Air Force spends its budget, including, I knew, a significant proportion of its black budget on advanced aircraft and weaponry. I sort of knew what he was going to say. I just wanted to hear him say it.
General, I've just spent a couple of days in southern Colorado where a lot of apparently credible witnesses are reporting sightings of extraordinarily unconventional aircraft. And I mean things like huge black triangles, silent helicopters, all kinds of very extraordinary craft. Should we be looking to the US Air Force for whatever is going on in this place?
Well, the only programs that I'm aware of that we have operating out in that environment, obviously our 117s operate out of Holloman. They're triangular shaped, obviously they're black, and they operate at night quite frequently and so on. But I think the 117 has become somewhat of a familiar planform to a lot of people, although it is difficult to recognize just because of its shape. It is triangular in many planes, as you know. And then all the rest of the airplanes that we have operating down in the Holloman area in particular are all conventional airplanes. So I don't know of any other development programs or anything else that's going on down in that area or in southern Colorado in general, or for that matter in the New Mexico area. We don't have anything of significance operating there. I can tell you as an aviator, though, quite frequently it is very, very difficult to discern what a platform is. B-2, for instance, if you're looking near co-altitude with it, it just seems to disappear into the background.
But again, these people are describing things that hover literally right over them sometimes. Seemingly unmistakable sightings of these things.
Well, I'll tell you, if they can get me the name of the contractor and whoever's operating, I'd love to put them under contract to develop some of these things. But they're not anything that we're flying down there right now that I'm aware of.
I went back to the desert to pursue the story. I'd known that the Air Force would be economical with the truth, but somehow I felt that General Mulner had been telling me as much as he could, even on the subject of new stealth developments. Equally remarkable was the fact he talked about black programs at all.
I think the next generation of stealth, beyond where we're at right now, at least initially, would probably be developed in the black. The techniques necessary to achieve those next gains, I think, are going to require some sensitivity. And there may be some weapons technologies that would be developed in a covert fashion until they're mature enough to bring forward. Those are the only two that really come to mind that would require a black development.
Given that it appears that few people really do seem to know, both in the military and in government, what is going on in the black world, I'm beginning to wonder who's accountable here. The interesting thing about the atomic bomb program was how few people in government knew about it. The only politicians who were let in on it were literally the President of the United States of the day. Towards the latter stages of the bomb program, other people were introduced to it. I think there is probably deep symmetry there with what is going on today, in that what we seem to be seeing on this journey is a whole raft of individuals in quite senior positions in the military and in government who do not know or do not appear to know what is going on.
For those of you interested in Los Angeles right now,
As I headed west, I was reminded of a conversation I'd had with Bob Widmer. He told me of the unbearable security restrictions he'd been subjected to in order to maintain project secrecy. I suspected not a whole lot had changed.
At the time, the CIA was in their glory. I don't want to go into details of the kind of life I had to lead, and the way and the things I had to do and conduct myself, with my family and so forth. I just want to tell you.
Was it very restrictive?
It was unbelievable. It was not only restrictive, but it was counter to my conscience and morals and so forth.
The whole thing of black program secrecy?
Yes. And I think it's bad. I think a person can do it for a small window in his career. I don't think he has to, but it's not what I would call, and it's part of our problem today. It's not what I would call a good formula over a long haul.
Counter-creative.
Not only counter-creative, counter against human, what I call human understanding of one another. I mean, the degree they went through in order to hold the secrecy was unbelievable.
Did it frighten you ever?
Yes.
I think the main reason we still have a lot of these black programs is because it's fun. People working on the program like to think that they're important, like to play I've Got a Secret. It makes it a lot easier to run a program if you don't have to worry about members of Congress asking questions at hearings or reporters running around reporting on the problems your program's having.
I was now heading for a rare interview with Jack Gordon, head of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, named after the foul-smelling chemicals they used to build their planes with. It was this facility, located on the edge of the high desert in California, that developed most of the Air Force's black aircraft, from the U-2 spy plane in the 1950s to the Blackbird in the 1960s and Stealth in the 1970s. Even though it has little to show for what it does today, the high level of employment at the plant suggests that the Skunk Works is still as busy as ever, doing what it does best.
Part of our mission statement in the Skunk Works speaks to urgently needed requirements. For instance, we were the inventors of the U-2 at a time when the world was quite concerned about what the Soviet Union was doing with their advanced bombers and strategic missiles.
You once told me that there are 3 shades of Skunk Works programs: white, grey and black. Give me an example from each category, if you will.
A white program, of course, is the standard program that everybody is familiar with, and an example of that today might be our single stage to orbit work, our X-33 prototype program that we're doing with NASA. And that is a program that is being managed on the internet. We're connected with a number of NASA centers and with government organizations and with our team partners. Gray program is one that has elements of secrecy associated with it, but is an acknowledged program. The F-117 would be in that category today, in that everybody is aware of the F-117 stealth fighter, but of course the actual signature characteristics and the operational characteristics of the airplane are close hold. So that would be an example of a special access gray program. And then a black program, of course, is an unacknowledged program that we just do not acknowledge that it exists at all, and that is that sensitive and is at the edge of our national defense.
Here's a catch-22 question. Do you have any unacknowledged programs at the moment?
What are unacknowledged programs?
Well, I'm asking you. Do you?
The answer is we just don't comment on unacknowledged programs, whether they exist or not. By definition, since they're unacknowledged, they're unacknowledged.
There's a kind of post-X-Files perception that the Skunk Works is responsible for just about anything. Are you responsible for UFOs?
Well, the Skunk Works has had a long association, I suppose, in the press with UFOs, with programs like Aurora, which I believe was really a a code word for some B-2 funding. I know in the popular magazines there has been some speculation that there is an underground tunnel between our Hellendale facility and Edwards Air Force Base where we transport the aliens back and forth. But I can assure you that I haven't seen any of these little green folks yet.
For all my contacts in the defense business, it was clear that the formal approach was going nowhere. The building blocks of a story were there. A government that had upwards of $30 billion a year to spend on classified programs, and ordinary people who were reporting things in the sky that they couldn't begin to explain. It was bridging the gap that was the challenging part. I decided to follow up something that Jim Mars had told me about a covert government scheme to invest in a form of psychic spying called remote viewing. The program itself was weird enough, but there was an even stranger twist in the tale.
The thing that finally pushed me off the fence as far as believing that there really was something going on and something probably outside of our normal experience was back in the early 90s when I discovered the U.S. Army's remote viewing program. Now, remote viewing is their term for being able to perceive persons and places at things at a distance by means other than the five senses, which is kind of a fancy way of what we used to call clairvoyance. It is a psychic ability, and you talk about skepticism. I was highly skeptical of that until I interviewed the people that were actually doing it within the Army and the people who had done it within the CIA and the scientists that had worked on it. It was one of the most scientifically studied experiments in history. I talked to people that were on the oversight committees of this whole thing and found out the government obviously felt like they were getting something from it because they'd kept funding it through 4 administrations, okay? And the bottom line was every single military-trained remote viewer had had a direct experience with the UFOs. And they all said that they represent craft from other worlds with people in them. So once I was satisfied that the remote viewing experience was legitimate, then I had to take seriously what they're saying.
Jim Mars gave me the phone number of Lynn Buchanan, an ex-Defense Intelligence Agency remote viewer whose credentials checked out. I felt uneasy because I was getting into the world of spying, where disinformation is part of the toolkit. But at this stage, I was prepared to try anything that might take the investigation forward, especially since Jim Mars' story seemed to imply that the American intelligence services might actually have been using their remote viewers to gather information on UFOs. Buchanan asked me to meet him outside a church in the dusty New Mexican town of Socorro.
experienced controlled remote viewer who's been at this for several years can carry this entire thing to where he can read a document locked in a safe halfway around the world, where he can draw the floor plans of a building where a hostage is being kept. And it's all done through the body. It's all a physical thing to do. There are no trances, no altered states of any kind. We had a senator come one time and see if he wanted to fund what we were doing. And he watched a demonstration session that we had. Afterwards, he said that he was totally underwhelmed, that all he saw was two guys sitting at a table smoking and joking, and now and then somebody'd write something down. Our director handed him the summary of our session and said, yeah, but look what they wrote down. He had brought in a target to task us with that only he knew the answer to. He looked at the target, he looked at our information we had provided. Damn, you know, and we got funded. It is not a mystical science. It's something that can be taught to anyone. It's more of a martial art than anything else.
So far, so good. But things were about to take an unexpected turn. As we chatted, it rapidly became clear that Buchanan's take on the UFO issue was a lot more personal than I'd ever imagined. Not only had he had a UFO experience as Mars had predicted, he also claimed to have been abducted.
This little gray guy started talking to me, and he was actually very nice. After we talked, he invited me up to the front where evidently the control area was, and he answered questions for me. He showed me everything that I asked about. He showed me how he worked this control panel. We were taking off and landing, and they'd bring more people in. We'd take off and land, and they'd bring somebody else in. And while we were landed, he actually let me play like I was working the control panel. And then one time before we went into a very long jump, he actually did the takeoff, let me work the control panel, and then took over when we landed again.
Where were you taking off and landing from and to?
I have no idea. It was the middle of the night, and so I have no idea where we were. I have no idea how far the short hops were. I have no idea.
As if all this wasn't surreal enough, Buchanan then told me that the captain of the alien ship had told him that he would immediately forget everything that had happened to him. And indeed that, he said, was just what had happened.
For 20 some odd years after that, I had this obsession. I couldn't leave the house without going back, knowing I'd forgotten something. I would go back and check the doors, check the locks, I would check everything. Finally, about 25 years after the event, I had gone back, my wife and I were going somewhere one Sunday, and I had gone back repeatedly to the house to see what I'd forgotten, and she started making fun of me. And she said, well, you've checked upstairs, you've checked downstairs, did you check the backyard? That's the only thing you haven't checked yet. When she said that, it just all flooded back, and I knew what I'd forgotten for 25 years.
The interview with Lynn Buchanan was probably one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. I found what he had to say about remote viewing very interesting, because this is something that I can correlate and verify. We do know that the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency ran a controlled remote viewing program from the mid-70s onwards. And we know that it was funded to the tune of $12 million or thereabouts. But when it gets into the realm of abductions and extraterrestrials he claimed to have experienced, then that is deeply weird territory for me, and it's not an area that I naturally feel comfortable with at all. But, you know, the guy said it happened to him, and who am I to disbelieve him? You know, I think it's one of those things you either have to accept or you don't, and I'm not going to be judgmental on it. The key issue for me was whether the Defense Intelligence Agency had taken the story seriously and perhaps kept a log of UFO experiences like Buchanan's.
Jim, hi, it's Nick Cook here.
It wouldn't be conclusive, but if Jim Mars had heard the story from other DIA sources, it would at least give it an outlandish sort of status.
Did you hear about his, let's say, abduction experience from other sources, or did you originally hear it from him? You heard it from other sources? Right, interesting. Well, it ties in completely with what you said. But I mean,
if nothing else, this journey into the world of psychic espionage, like my earlier detour to NASA, had shown that significant government money was being spent on ideas right on that frontier of what is real and what is imagined. It was time to get back to hardcore defense. This is where the US Air Force develops and tests exotic-sounding weapons like lasers and plasma cannons. Technology on the very edge of achievable science. These lasers are being used to measure distances across the galaxy, but the US Air Force is also developing the technology into a powerful new weapon.
Throughout time, there have been advances that have changed dramatically the way wars are fought. We believe this is one of those advances because for the first time, it will allow us to strike an attacking missile from hundreds of miles away at the speed of light. So to strike at the speed of light, it signals a new era of defense. What you're looking at here is a model of the United States Air Force's airborne laser, a project to package a weapons-class laser on a Boeing 747-400 series freighter aircraft, a commercial aircraft, placing that laser in that aircraft, and then developing all the technologies needed so that that laser light will emanate from the nose of the aircraft to strike a theater ballistic missile hundreds of miles away. The type of missile, theater ballistic missile, typical would be the Scud missiles that were used against us in the Gulf War.
Hostile, cleared to fire.
As I listened to Rich Garcia, the thought I couldn't get out of my head was this. If an Air Force information officer is showing me this stuff, what on earth are they doing behind closed doors? Striking at the speed of light is all very well, but trying to book a hotel room in Las Vegas on a US public telephone is a challenge all of its own. I was now on the very last leg of my journey. The point where the white world of open defense meets the black world of super secrecy.
never thought I'd look on Vegas as anything like a regular place, but considering where I've been and where I'm going, it almost feels normal.
Going up.
It's Nick Cook here, how are you? The place I'm heading for is Area 51.
Not too bad, not too bad at all.
Nowhere in America is more secret or has attracted more suspicion about what the government is up to. What I needed was a guide who could show me the ropes.
All being well, we'll be chatting with a chap called Mark Farmer, who he's more of a journalist than a kind of a obsessive, but he's also tracked a lot of secret aircraft and defense programs, and I'm entering a world here that I haven't come across hitherto, which is people who are prepared to give up an awful lot of time to track programs and aircraft. I guess really they're enthusiasts, but in a very, very dedicated way, in a way that most of us don't have the time or the energy or the inclination to do.
Area 51 is 100 miles north of Vegas. In recent years, it has become a meeting point for people looking for top-secret black aircraft and those who believe in ET. Quite where these two fitted in, I hadn't a clue.
I've only seen something unusual just once, and that was in 96? It was in 96. And don't know what it was, but it wasn't an airplane. But that's about all I know.
It looked like a firefly above the ridge. It was bouncing on the ridge.
A blue light firefly just bouncing around in the air, and then it went away. So we know what it wasn't, but don't know what it was.
So what do you think is going on in there?
Testing. Aircraft and other aerial vehicles.
Definitely testing.
High technology. They've been there for years testing. This is a perfect place for it.
A lot of people say there's nothing there, but the way I see it, why would they have such security there?
If there's nothing there.
Yeah, they watch you like a hawk when you go out there.
We were just out there, and they were watching us like a hawk.
We got the jump on.
But this is if you're going to test, that really weird stuff, that high technology stuff, what better place in the middle of nowhere?
I guess you get all sorts out here. On the road out of Vegas is Rachel, a tiny settlement in the shadow of Area 51 that's largely populated by, and in some cases making a living from, people who are convinced that aliens are amongst us.
How many people do you think you've had come through here?
Oh, gosh. A million, maybe?
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Lots of folks. It's
well,
amazing.
You guys have been around just today, and you've seen where it got busy. You've seen where it got slow. And you've seen all the in-between things. But it happens like that. And by just going through our guest books, I probably have this many signatures at least
Pages.
put together.
Pages
just pages and pages. Not,
both sides.
Have you had any strange experiences that have happened to you here?
Well, we had one that to us kind of set things in motion. We had a beam of light about this big around, a big flashlight, come through the door. That was the size, about a big flashlight.
It's that door right there.
It shot about 6 feet into the room. It totally illuminated the door jamb. And it was at least 20 below zero outside, so I'm telling you, the door was closed. This
It was very
object
cold.
came through.
We were the only ones here.
Right.
At that time.
It happened between 8:30 and 9:30 at night, and we both felt that there was a presence. Well, we looked at each other. We were listening to television, talking, and said...
I said, did you see what I think I just saw? She said, yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I said, make yourself at home. You're welcome to be here. And then she said,
Oh, we got to laughing because it was close to Christmas, the holidays, and you put milk and cookies out for Santa Claus. So I said, well, maybe. Oh, I said, no, if you can come through a steel-clad door, you can damn well open a beer can or get in one of my refrigerators. So just go ahead and help yourself, you know.
Soon after Rachel, I turned onto an unmarked road. Just ahead was Area 51. It doesn't look like much, but Area 51, also known as Groom Lake, is so secret it doesn't appear on any maps, even though it's surrounded by a closed-off piece of government land the size of Switzerland. For a place that doesn't officially exist, its security is incredibly tight, though you have to look hard to know it's there. I had been forewarned that every mile of my approach would be monitored by security cameras and sensor devices. What have we been able to glean about what goes on inside Area 51? The answer is not much. There's an airbase inside, and its 6-mile runway is the longest on Earth. The people who work here are brought in on private buses or flown in on unmarked charter planes. This is the crossover from the white world to the black, the place where the road runs out, and where I met my contact, Mark Farmer.
So Mark, I feel like I'm on the edge of the world, but tell me, where are we?
In some ways you are on the edge of the world, the edge of the white world. As you go over there a couple hundred yards is the border to the restricted area which surrounds the Groom Lake covert testing facility. And once you go just beyond the road there, past those signs that we were just at, you're liable to arrest, search and seizure. People that are taken and arrested there are forced to sign a statement that makes sure that they were exposed to any inadvertent exposure to classified material. And you know, they do business differently just a couple hundred yards from here. That out here we enjoy all the rights and privileges as citizens of the United States and the United States Constitution. But you pass that line and all that ends.
For skeptics, these pictures provide proof of Area 51's existence. They were taken from a peak overlooking the base, which has since been commandeered by the government and closed to the public. For me, pictures are simply icing on the cake. I've never seen the base inside Area 51, but like the black world itself, I don't need to know it's there.
Area 51 out in the Nevada desert has long been America's most highly classified aerospace research and development center. During the Cold War, that was where we developed spy planes like the U-2 and the SR-71, and that's where we tested stealth aircraft. I think it's clearly the case that there continue to be a number of advanced technology aircraft being tested at Area 51.
This is the heartland of the billion-dollar secret. And now that I'm here, the question that's nagging me is, how much secrecy do you actually need in a post-Cold War world?
Hey, it's been going on for almost 50 years. You know, there's been an incredible investment in these facilities. It's a way of doing business, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And you also have to look at it as the people who are in charge out there, these civil servants who are non-elected, you know, folks who are running these programs, still view this through the prism of that conflict. That it's still an us versus them to most of these people. And also, you know, some of these programs maybe didn't work out very well. You know, a lot of money is spent on these. You know, maybe you built a $15 billion turkey. Who wants to be responsible for that? So a lot of it is a, you know, cover your own behind sort of mentality.
I think it is important for us to be able to send our warriors to the battlefield with the best possible equipment to give them the greatest possible advantage. We are not into attrition warfare, and as a result of that, we need to maintain a technological superiority on that battlefield. I think it is a very small price to pay for the general public not to have total access to these things until the right time comes along in order to maintain that technological superiority.
That's not something Glenn Campbell agrees with. He'd been an activist against black world secrecy for years.
As long as you have a black world, you have a country within a country, a sort of totalitarian regime that does not conform to the rules of outside democracy. It is kind of an anachronism. It doesn't really belong here in America, yet here it is. As long as you have a need for defense, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have a military that isn't accountable. You're going to have a world that isn't accountable to our normal rules. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that there should be no secrets in the military. It's just an interesting place to study how humanity works. I equate Area 51. Area 51 awakens in me an old memory I have of going to Berlin during the Cold War and peering over the wall into East Berlin. There's the same feeling of being on the border of something. I've always been interested in borders, places where two opposite cultures come together, and this is that sort of place. Nevada itself, Las Vegas, is a very freedom-oriented place. You can do anything you want. You can gamble all your money away. You can, in some parts of the state, you can go to prostitutes. You can, freedom is what Nevada is all about. Yet within Nevada, you have a place where there's no freedom, where the society is controlled by a totalitarian regime. That, to me, is a little bit like the old East Berlin.
Campbell told me that when you sign the oath of secrecy that lets you work in Area 51, you pretty much hand over your life to the government. I then met a woman whose husband had done just that.
It's a secret base. Nobody knows it's there, except the whole world. You go up to the little Alien Inn up in Rachel, right near the test site. Alien pictures everywhere. Everyone knows what Area 51 is. And everyone knows what Route 95 is. And that leads up to Mercury, which is the gateway to the base up there. And that's called the Widowmaker's Highway. And I didn't know for years what it meant. I thought it was because the buses drove so fast that they had a lot of accidents. I didn't realize that if you went to work there that you were going to die.
Helen's husband worked inside Area 51 for 5 years. Then he fell seriously ill. But because of his oath of secrecy, he couldn't tell his doctors much to help them.
My husband went to a doctor. He wasn't allowed to tell him anything about where he worked or what he did or what kind of materials he handled, how many people worked there. He couldn't tell him anything because it would put him in jeopardy of going to jail by violating his oath. So it was very difficult for the doctors to diagnose anything, and they just kept sending him from one doctor to another. And I remember one day in particular, we went to the doctor and she took one look at him and she said, "My God, you're losing your whole face," because it was peeling so badly. So she sent him to a skin doctor and he did every test he could think of, but he couldn't figure it out. Well, in the meantime, while this was going on, he would come home, you know, every so often and say, well, this guy got sick, or this guy died, or this guy's having an operation, and the guys are, you know, getting together and getting a collection up for these guys. And for a while there, it was like every week. And I said, well, what's going on up there? Why is everybody getting sick?
Helen's husband died, and he wasn't the only one. She and a group of former workers at Area 51 sued for compensation, and their case went to the Supreme Court.
So far, it's been very frustrating. The government won't even agree that Area 51 exists. And of course, the guys are being threatened with jail if they speak up. So we're getting nothing but stonewalling. It's like the government doesn't care what happens to them.
America is full of contradictions when it comes to secrecy and openness. On the one hand, you've got, on the surface, a very open society. It prides itself on being extremely open. This is a country with a Freedom of Information Act. You can get access to any information that you want, supposedly. But actually, that's not true. There is a whole section of the community, of government, of life, which is ring-fenced from that, and which you cannot get access to. And I think the intention is actually that you should never get access to it. And that's something that I've been acutely aware of as I've made the journey.
Makes me angry that we're not being told a great deal, because in certain times in the past when we were subject to the restrictions of the Cold War, it may have made sense to guard highly secret, confidential technological information from a mortal enemy such as the Soviet Union. However, today, ostensibly, when the Cold War is over, this massive degree of classification still exists, and it extends into other areas besides UFOs, and yet we still have this mindset to cover up. We still have this mindset that treats the American people as if we're a bunch of sheep or a bunch of children who can't decide things for themselves, or would panic at the slightest disruption of our world beliefs or mindset.
Obviously, with the Cold War over, we have lost a focused threat. That doesn't mean that the world environment out there is any more benign. As we sit here today, we've got airplanes deployed all around the world, exerting missions for our national security. To maintain that technological edge in the future requires the same sort of focus on modernization, on bringing these new technologies to the battlefield, so we don't find ourselves trapped into an attrition war situation. As a result of that, the technologies that are developed in the black world need to continue to be matured, and when the time is right, brought forward in the form of weapons systems.
Now, during the Cold War, it made sense to have those black programs. Now that the Soviet Union is no longer our adversary, it's still a dangerous world, but it's not like it was back in those days. And if we have a functioning technology in a black program, we should not be spending billions of dollars in a program that's visible to the public, trying to duplicate those technologies we already have. We can't afford that kind of waste. During the Cold War we could, because that was part of our defense expenditure of keeping those things secret. Well, we don't need to waste that money now.
husband did do his duty for his country. He took the oath. He was helping building their defense system. And when he had a problem, there was no one there for him. And there's no one there for the other guys. They took the oath and they're sitting home suffering. And they have nowhere to go. I mean, it's even worse than being in a military, because at least they had the VA. They have nobody to go to. They have absolutely nothing.
Helen's case against Area 51 forced the government to improve environmental protection for its workers. But her request to find out what materials they were using was turned down by the Supreme Court on the grounds of national security.
So what do I actually know at the end of this journey? I know that the Pentagon is involved in some amazing science, and that beneath this science, only the pinnacles of which we can see, lies some truly extraordinary and even stranger defense work, which may or may not explain the existence of UFOs. Do I think UFOs exist? Well, I saw enough in southern Colorado to know that there is something extremely strange going on there. But to say, you know, that there is any one explanation for what is happening there, I think is wholly simplistic. I think that the flip side of the truly inspirational work that a lot of these engineers are doing out in the desert is that, you know, there are people at the end of this story. There are people in Colorado, there are people in Nevada who are getting hurt by all of this. And, you know, that's actually, I suppose, at the end of the journey, what I come back to. It's one of the few things, actually, that you can cling to as being real. And, you know, I wonder sometimes whether the people who are doing these extraordinary things out in the desert, fiddling around with strange science, you know, are bearing that in mind, whether they actually know what they're doing to the little guy. And I think now it's just worth remembering that when I look back on a month of the most extraordinary, really was the most extraordinary month, I think, of my professional life. And I can't pretend that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. But it was a bit scary at times too.